there folks, welcome to the channel. I'm glad you could be here. My name is Eric, and in today's episode we're going to be remaking a classic Italian salami. I'm talking about the Gentile Salami. Some of you may remember when we originally featured the Gentile Salami on Celebrate Sausage Season 4, Episode 19, and in that episode I vowed to remake that salami, but with the appropriate casing. This particular salami uses a very specific casing called the Budello Gentile, hence the name of the salami. It's also known as the hog bung, and this particular casing is extremely thick-walled, and it's that extra thickness that really helps your salami dry slower. Well, when we feature this particular sausage on Celebrate Sausage Season 4, I could not get my hands on the hog bung in time, and we ended up just using like 60mm beef middles or something like that. That was the thickest casing that I had. Even with the beef middle, it still only took about 60 days for the salami to finish drying. And I'm halfway curious to find out how long this salami is going to take when we use the appropriate casing. We're also going to be using a different type of mold in this video. So for those of you who are looking for different mold options, different flavor profiles on your finished product, you're going to want to see how that ends up. And of course, we're going to be drying this in our Reserve 50 drying chamber. So this is a small to mid-size drying chamber we've been featuring here on this channel, and today will be the first time we've ever done a full-blown salami, something that takes longer than 2 months inside the chamber. So I'm halfway interested to see how that's going to turn out as well. Let's get started. One of the more unique elements to the salami is the casing, the Budello Gentile, and we got ours from Craft Butcher's Pantry. I believe one of the only suppliers in North America that sell this particular casing. They also have a bunch of other really cool casings. Anyway, I'll put a link to this product in the description box below. There's 5 to a pack, and they are 24 inches long. And if you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to share a couple thoughts that I had regarding this specific casing that I think some of you salamists out there might find incredibly interesting. So as you can see, these casings are salt packed, which means all I gotta do is rinse off the salt both inside and out, and then let it soak in some cool water. One end of this hog bung is tied, and because it is so long, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and cut it in half so that we can place it inside of our small chamber. If you have a relatively large chamber, then you don't have to cut this in half. You can leave it whole, it'll be totally great. So I'm just gonna give it a cut right here and go ahead and tie off the other end as well, and that'll give us our 2 pieces that we'll be able to hang inside of our Reserve 50 dry curing cabinet. We're going to let this soak in that clean water until it's time for us to use it. Let's take a peek at the meat we're going to be using. For this salami, we're going to be using lean pork and pork back fat. The pork here comes from the hind leg of the pig. And check out this knife. This is a knife that I got from Brazilian Flame. It's this picanha knife, and what I love about it is that all you've got to do is put it up to like a honing rod real quick, and you can literally get this thing razor sharp. This knife is shave ready. I mean, absolutely amazing. And let's take a second right now and talk about meat selection. When you make salami, specifically salami makers, what cut of meat are you using? Are you using the pork shoulder? Are you using belly or pork loin, maybe even the hind leg of the pig? Because I have been experiencing the strangest issue in the finished product of the salami that uses pork shoulder. And I think I want to make a video about it because it might not be the best cut of meat for salami, and I may be alone in this, but let me know what your thoughts are. Have you experienced any issues in the finished product of your salami that uses pork shoulder? All right, let's move forward. This is our meat. It's cut up nicely. We're going to go ahead and take it and pop it in the freezer. I want this partially frozen before we grind it. So I'm shooting for 32 to 34 degrees Fahrenheit. And let's take a look at the rest of our ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lay them out so we can look at them very quickly. The recipe will be in the description box below, but we have salt, cured pepper, garlic, and a little dextrose. Dextrose is going to feed the starter culture. I'm also going to be using just a little white wine, whatever white wine you prefer. Not that big a deal. Next up, we need to prepare a starter culture and a mold culture. And I realize now that having the starter culture and the mold culture in similar looking containers is probably not the best idea. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But let's take a look at what we're working with when it comes to cultures and mold. We do have mold 800, and that's a fairly new mold. I'd say a couple years old. I'm going to be using that for today's salami. In the world of starter cultures, we've got here in front of us TSPX. That one is adequate. SM194, that one would work as well. LHP dry is kind of for tangy salami. our sausages. Flavor of Italy is my go-to. I think we'll end up using that one. BLC 78 is for whole mussels, and FLC, that could go either way. All right, so we're going to go with Flavor of Italy, but as you can see, you can kind of use almost whatever culture you want. Really depends on the flavor profile you're going for. We're going to give the culture pack a little shake, make sure it's loose, the powder is free-flowing, and in a little less than a quarter cup of water, I'm going to go ahead and put in a quarter teaspoon of starter culture. Now the recipe will have the exact amount that you need for all this stuff, but once I'm done, I am going to go ahead and put that to the side, and let's take a look at our mold. I'm going to prepare a little more mold than I typically need because I've found a way to actually store it in the fridge for about 60 days. And so whatever I don't use for this project, I'm just going to pop it in the fridge and it'll be totally cool for the next 8 weeks, and I don't have to just make it every time. So we are going to put about a half a teaspoon of mold culture in what's about a half a cup of water, and go ahead and put that up. Now the best way to store your cultures is in the freezer, coldest part of the freezer. I personally like to keep them in a vacuum bag. These bags are super handy because you could reuse them, but if you keep this in the coldest part of your freezer under vacuum, your culture will still be good for several years past the expiration date. Notice this expired November 12th, 2022, and I think when we shot this part of the video, it was at least a year or maybe a year and 3 months past the expiration date. So we're going to go ahead and close that off. Like I said earlier, I like this particular method of storage because the bag and the handheld vacuum sealer are pretty inexpensive. I think around 20 bucks. You get 5 bags. And honestly, I've been using this exact same bag for the last probably 2 years at least, and I just reseal it every time and pop it in the freezer, and there you go. That's what that looks like. So into the freezer it goes, and let's finish up the mold and the culture preparation. We are going to give each one of them a stir. I do want the culture to rehydrate for about 30 minutes before I use it, and then we're going to give the mold a quick stir as well. Mold 800 is actually a combination of 2 different types of mold, so it should give us a really interesting flavor. We'll talk a little more about that at the end of this video. The one thing you don't really want to do is mix up the mold and the starter culture. If you happen to put the mold in the salami and the starter culture on the exterior of the salami, it's not the end of the world, although it's really not going to do anything for fermentation. So you definitely don't want to mix those 2 liquids up. Keep the mold on one side, the starter culture on the other side. Our meat is now partially frozen. We're looking at a proper 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's get this into our number 12 grinder. And for this beautiful Italian salami, we're going to do a coarse grind. So I'm going to be using a number 10 grinding plate. If you want to go a little bigger, you can certainly go a little bit bigger. I probably wouldn't go a whole lot smaller, but you know what? At the end of the day, the choice is yours. Let's get this ground up. And I'm loving how this is coming out. Very pebbly, and that's because it was partially frozen going in, but we need to re-chill it, and now it's been re-chilled. So let's just take the temperature one more time. I'm looking for anything under 34 degrees, and it looks like we are perfect. 33.5, no problem there. When you re-chill your meat, you're actually going to solidify the fat, which is going to give you better particle definition in your finished product. So let's start by adding our starter culture, right? We're not adding the mold, we're adding the starter culture, and we're going to give it a mix. Notice we haven't added anything else at this point. Starter culture only. Now we're going to come in with a little wine. Once the wine is in and mixed a few turns, we are going to now add our spices. And there we go. The wine is going to help break up that meat, loosen it up a bit. The salt is going to start to extract those proteins, and this is going to be the end result, a very beautiful, sticky meat batter. Look at that. Absolutely gorgeous. Very, very sticky. Loving the protein extraction. We're going to have a great bind on our salami. No doubt about it. And I'm loving the marbling. Big chunks of fat, so those stayed frozen through the mixing process. Let's get this into our sausage stuffer. We're using a 5-pound sausage stuffer, nothing fancy. If at all possible, you want to use a sausage stuffer when making salami because you want to preserve the integrity of the meat. If you use, your grinder or a KitchenAid, you will generate way too much heat and it will begin to smear the fat. So let's get this casing onto the horn and stuff that meat right into that budello gentili. And here's where it's tricky because we want to stuff it tightly, but you don't want to stuff it too tightly, otherwise you can burst the casing. So with my left hand, I'm squeezing down and I'm making sure that it's on there nice and tight, but not tight enough to where the casing becomes translucent and then eventually rips. I did the other one off camera, and it's now time to weigh each one of those chubs. The first one weighs 1,131 grams. And on a ticket, my actual weight, that's the 1,131 grams, we're shooting for a 40% weight loss. And that's what the T represents, the target weight, 679 grams. So when we hit that target weight, our salami will be ready to eat. The next thing I want to do is prick the salami. I'm using this extreme sausage pricker. I think there's like 16 needles in here to give this the good old-fashioned poke. We want to make sure that we aid in some of that moisture transfer because this is such a thick casing. And so I'm going to prick it everywhere, and now it's time to apply the mold. So remember, the mold goes on the outside, the culture goes on the inside, and all I'm going to do is brush a little bit of that mold onto the salami itself. So I'm just going to put a little bit on there and then brush it, and there we go. That's it. Pretty simple. This is quite possibly the most cost-effective way to apply mold. What is left over right here, I'm going to add a little salt, a little dextrose, and pop it in my fridge. If you want to see the video on how to preserve your salami, check out the video suggestion at the end of this video. All right, the hard work is now behind us. And now we need to ferment our salami. That's what the starter culture is for. And to ferment the salami, we need to create two environments, humidity and temperature. What I'm doing now is simply wrapping the salami in cling film. That's basically going to trap all of that moisture inside that cling film, generating a very high humid environment. So as far as the humidity goes, we are covered. No need to worry about it. Both of my salamis have now been wrapped, and we are going to take a little bit of the mincemeat that we had left over in our stuffing horn, which is what this is right here, and we're going to put that in some cling film as well. When it comes time to test the pH of our salami meat, I don't want to disturb the chub, so we're just going to test this little sample piece, and everything's going to be okay. Now that we've got all that done, the next environment we need to consider is temperature. The Flavor of Italy starter culture likes a temperature range between 75 Fahrenheit and 95 Fahrenheit, so you can literally place this salami anywhere in your home where you can achieve that temperature. In my case, the room that this is in right now is about 75 F, so I'm just going to leave it right there on my counter. I may put something over it to protect it. But if you're having a hard time getting to those temperatures, you can place this in an ice chest with a seed mat. You could put it in your oven with a light on. It really doesn't matter. Just as long as you have the right temperature and the right humidity, your salami meat is going to ferment beautifully. All right? If you have any questions about that, let me know in the comment section. It takes about 24 hours for Flavor of Italy to do its thing, and it's now been 24 hours later, and we're going to test the pH of the meat. Proper fermentation typically means that you need to get the meat below 5.2. And as I open up this little sample pack, I want you to pay very close attention to what's happened to the meat over the last 24 hours. First, you're going to notice the texture of the meat. It's a little waxy, a little glossy. The color has intensified slightly. It has a completely different texture than raw meat. It's more bound together. Let's give it a smell. Very nice, very pleasant, slightly sweet, slightly acidic. And so I can tell you right now that we are in the right direction. When we use the Apera Instruments pH meter, we're looking for anything under 5.2, and it looks like we are at 5.08. Excellent. This means we can start drying. When it comes to salami making, getting to the right pH is one of the safety hurdles that helps you produce a safe product. Basically, anything under 5.3 is a good target. And the more you make salami, the more you can fine-tune your process and get into the nuances of how pH affects color, flavor, aroma, things like that. But anything under 5.3 is acceptable. And since we've already hit that, it's time to hang these to begin the drying process. Like I said earlier, we're going to be using the Reserve 50 dry curing cabinet. This is a relatively small dry curing cabinet, and I will put a link in the description box below in case you're interested in learning a little bit more about it. Notice that, at least right now, I'm just going to be laying them on their side. I'm not necessarily going to be hanging them. What I've got right there on top is the picanha that we dry cured. If you haven't seen that video already, I'll put a link suggestion at the end of this video. Absolutely amazing way to enjoy some Brazilian picanha. And our project is officially finished. 15 weeks later, the temperature was 55 Fahrenheit or 13 Celsius, and the humidity was around 80%. And this is what it looked like. I want you to notice a few things, because when you have extended dry times, especially one that almost takes 4 months, you're going to notice that the mold coverage goes through stages of life. It's not nearly as fluffy and as predominant as it was, let's say, at week number 3 or week number 2. But as of right now, we have beautiful mold coverage, and we are 15 weeks into the process. So almost 4 months. Absolutely amazing. Let's take a quick look at how they feel. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what to expect. It's firm, but it feels firm throughout. I do like the mold coverage, and it smells Very nice. It has more of a floral element, a little bit of that earthiness, but I'm loving the Mold 800 and what that brings, at least to the initial reaction. Let's give it a cut on the end. These are tricky pieces to dry cure. Anyone who's made salami can tell you that sometimes those end pieces are not indicative of what the salami looks like, but I am loving what I'm looking at right there. So those end pieces dried beautifully. Let's give it a quick center slice. Oh, wow. Nice. Look at that. Beautiful marbling. That looks gorgeous. The Gentile salami sliced beautifully. Loving the bind. Nice tight bind on those thin slices. Beautiful fat. Let's eat it. All right, guys, moment of truth. What do you think? The Budello Gentile round number 2. Beautiful particle definition, and I'm loving the 10mm grind. And if I had to be completely honest right now, I'm kind of blown away as to how even this is dried. I mean, check that out one more time. Edge to edge, not even a trace of dry ring. Absolutely amazing. And I guess that shouldn't surprise me too much because everything we've put in the Reserve 50, from the filet to the bresaola to the patina, it's all actually come out quite good. But maybe coupled with the extra thick casing, the slower dry time, this took almost 4 months. Where under normal circumstances, it would take about 2 months, given the diameter. But almost 4 months in the drying chamber, we lost about 42% weight. And I am just dying to know what this tastes like. So I am going to remove the casing, the Budello Gentile, aka hog rectum. Very easy to come off. No problem there. You can leave it on if you want to give you an extra boost of mold, but I'm not going to eat the hog rectum today. Down the hatch. Here we go. Oh. Wow. That is magnificent. It's like I'm eating a completely different salami. And don't get me wrong, version 1 of our Gentile salami was delicious. It tasted like a classic Italian salami, but this version, with basically double the dry time, the extra time for the pork to age and really develop its flavors, we did lose a little bit more weight. I think the first one we pulled at about 35%. Took 2 months to get there. This one took almost 4 months and we were down to 42%. And so it did slow the drying process dramatically. The texture of the salami is a little more firm than version 1, which I'm not hating. Let's talk about the mold real quick because what a wonderful flavor. Mold 600, which is what people typically use, Penicillium nalgiavense, tends to bring a pretty forward, earthy, mushroomy, kind of funky flavor. Now, I don't mind those flavors in a salami. I think it accents it beautifully, but there are some people who kind of prefer not to have that. Today's mold, Mold 800, actually has a combination of molds like we talked about earlier. You've got Penicillium nalgiavense and you've got Penicillium candidum. So instead of coming in strong with the funky, earthy mushroom flavors, it's actually quite balanced with more of a cheesy and floral element. And so in my opinion, I find this particular mold to be a little bit better balanced in flavors. You're still getting the elements of Penicillium nalgiavense. It's just not nearly as strong, and I like that kind of cheesy element. It does remind me of like a camembert or a brie cheese, and it just adds so much to this salami. The problem with Mold 800 is that it's always been just a little bit pricier than Mold 600, and so when it came to mold options, people just gravitated to the lesser expensive of the two. But I just noticed today that the sausage maker has Mold 800 on sale for 50% off, and so if you are needing to re-up on your mold, or if you just want to try a different variety of mold, definitely give Mold 800 a shot. It's probably never going to be any cheaper than it is today. I just got to get one more bite. You know what I'm talking about? This is so good. Here we go. Unbelievable. Night and day difference between version 1 and version 2. Version 1 was good, like I said earlier, but this version is off the chart. The sweetness of the pork is coming through a lot stronger. The complexity of flavor is more pronounced. Interestingly enough, the citrus notes and those fruity notes that we were able to pick up in version 1 because of the wine have actually mellowed out a little bit. And so they're more like soft undertones, which in my opinion just kind of accent the entire salami. Unreal. What an amazing salami. And it just goes to show you that the casing does make a huge difference. It's actually got me thinking maybe I should go back and remake some of my older salami recipes. The black salami, the Genoa salami, the hard, the finocchiona, those different salami recipes, but with the Budello Gentile casing to see if we can elevate that flavor even more without sacrificing the texture. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering, now I'm totally speculating here, but I'm wondering if this thicker walled casing will actually help with those of you who experience dry ring on a pretty frequent basis. So let's say your chamber is dialed in at 80% or 75% humidity, and you've got a 55 Fahrenheit or 13 Celsius temperature, but you still get salami that tends to dry kind of quick. Maybe you have an airflow issue, or you do get a bit of dry ring. Try this casing out. Now, granted, it's going to take a little bit longer. You're probably looking at maybe 3 months, 3.5 months before your salami is finished. But I believe that regulated moisture loss, that slower drying time, is not only going to produce a more flavorful salami, but it might actually fix your dry ring issue until you can figure out what's actually causing it. All right, folks, thanks a lot for watching this video. Don't forget to check out the description box below where we'll have links to all the different things that we used in this video. We'll also have a link to the recipe in the event that you want to make this for yourself. If you have any questions or comments about today's episode, leave them in the comment section below. And if you're new to this channel and you enjoy sausage making, meat preservation, salami making, or the art of charcuterie, be sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And for those of you that are curious, yes, we are currently working on Celebrate Sausage Season 5. October 1st is the premiere date. It's going to be an absolutely epic year of sausage making. I don't want you to miss it. Thanks a lot for watching this video, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.